Happy Friday and welcome to the Jeremiah Patterson Show. Congratulations, you made it through the 5-day work week. So did I. Lots of reporting this week, but we are happy to be here. We are happy to do this. To end off the crazy news week, we are bringing you a TJPS special report about something that is happening right now that lots of people are not talking about, but should be getting major coverage. Our guest tonight is highly acclaimed producer Brad Starks. He's going to be here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show to discuss what's happening in regard to this. But in order to tell this story, we must start here. This is 19-year-old Michael Donald, and he was a young black Alabaman. He was born and raised in Mobile, Alabama. And on the night of March 20th, 1981, 19-year-old Michael Donald was walking home after purchasing cigarettes. And on his walk home, all of a sudden, he was taunted and ambushed at random. He was attacked, viciously beaten, strangled, killed, and then hung from a tree. After they strangled him and he stopped moving, they slit his throat to basically ensure he was dead. They slit his throat multiple times. This is reporting from the New York Times here. Quote, Michael Donald was alone, walking home when Knowles and Hayes spotted him. They pulled over, asked him for directions to a nightclub, then pointed the gun at him and ordered him to get in. They drove to the next county. When they stopped, Michael begged them not to kill him, then tried to escape. Henry Hayes and Knowles chased him, caught him, hit him with a tree limb more than 100 times. And when he was no longer moving, wrapped the rope around his neck, Henry Hayes shoved his boot in Michael's face and pulled on the rope. For good measure, they cut his throat. End quote. It was 2 members of the Ku Klux Klan that had murdered Michael. On that same night as well, 2 members of the KKK had burned a cross, essentially, to celebrate the murder. This is how Michael's mother, Beulah Mae Donald, found out that her youngest child had been murdered. Quote, in her dream, there was a steel gray casket in a living room. Who was the dead man laid out in a gray suit? She couldn't tell. And every time she moved closer to the coffin, someone she didn't know said, you don't need to see this. But Beulah Mae Donald knew that she did. And so she woke from her dream at 2 a.m. in Mobile, Alabama on March 21st, 1981. The first thing she said, she later did, essentially was, look in the other bedroom where her youngest child slept. Michael, 19, wasn't there. She telephoned one of her other 6 children. Though Michael had watched television with his cousins earlier in the evening, he had left before midnight. Miss Donald drank 2 cups of coffee and moved to her couch, where she waited for the new day. At dawn, Michael still wasn't home. To keep busy, she went outside to rake her small yard. As she worked, a woman delivering insurance policies came by. They found a body, she said, and walked on. Shortly before 7 a.m., Miss Donald's phone rang. A woman had found Michael's wallet in a trash can bin. Miss Donald brightened. Michael was alive, she thought. No, baby. They had a party over here, and they killed your son. You'd better send somebody over here. Just a few blocks from her house, a heinous hate crime had been committed. And Michael's body was still hanging when the sun rose the next morning, with his neck strangled with 13 loops around his neck. 13 loops had been tied. They raised his body high enough, essentially, so that it could swing. And at the time of the murder, the Mobile police chief essentially believed that it was the work of the local KKK that did this. So they immediately got to work and arrests were made. 3 young men were initially arrested, but they weren't involved, so they were released. And by the time the district attorney and the FBI had opened an investigation into Michael's murder, that investigation didn't really do anything, and basically it let the murderers walk free. It wasn't until 2 years later in 1983 that a second investigation was opened at the FBI, and this one was far more serious. This time they got a confession and they also got a conviction. Henry Hayes, one of the murderers, received the death penalty, which is pretty rare, especially in these type of cases back then. Michael's mother issued a statement of gratitude and regret as she was still grieving. But she was not done. She and others organized and challenged the entire criminal justice system. They challenged the silence of the KKK, specifically a group called the United Klansmen of America. Many of them were charged and arrested, and they were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison for murder. But at the time, again, those convictions were not enough for Beulah May Donald. That was not going to bring her son back. And it wasn't that she wanted revenge. It wasn't that she wanted money. But she wanted to prove that her son did nothing wrong. Her perseverance inspired and summoned a village of attorneys and civil rights defenders, black and white. And in February of 1987, 4 years after the convictions, one of the Klansmen who murdered and assaulted Michael admitted that he wasn't really a threat. They just attacked him for no reason. They wanted to show their strength and make their presence known in the community, and hoping essentially that this would be grand enough that it would intimidate other black citizens, ultimately deterring them from sitting on the juries. Their goal essentially was to have all white juries in Alabama, which, if we know anything about the history of this country, that has proved nothing to be about serving justice, but about protecting white supremacy. And so all of that was confessed in court, and a life sentence was handed down. The judge was not moved by his remorse here. But as I said, even though justice had prevailed, Michael Donald's mother was not done. She brought a civil lawsuit on behalf of her and her family, not just against the killers, but also the organization they were a part of. And she won. She went after everything they had and won. An all-white Alabama jury awarded $7 million in damages against the United Klansmen of America and gave it to Beulah May Donald.
The United Klans of America, the country's oldest group of Ku Klux Klansmen, is threatened with financial ruin. That's because of a verdict last night by a jury in Mobile, Alabama, giving $7 million in damages to the family of a black man murdered by members of this group. As NBC's Dan Molina reports, this is a new way of fighting back against the Klan.
No comments at all?
Leaders of the largest and most secretive of the Ku Klux Klan organizations were not in a talkative mood last night as they left federal court. Robert Sheldon, Imperial Wizard of the United Klans of America.
I don't have any comments, just move, please, I'm fixing to go home.
But anti-Klan groups were jubilant today.
No, I think it's going to hurt them. I think they'll find it more difficult to recruit. I think they probably will lose some members as a result.
The crime in question was committed March 21st, 1981. The savagely beaten body of Michael Donald, a 19-year-old black man, was found hanging from a tree. In 1983, Klan member Henry Hayes was sentenced to death for the murder. Another Klansman, James Knowles, received a life sentence. Now, $7 million in damages awarded to Donald's family.
Because that was my baby, and nothing they do can bring him back. But I still say I am proud that this came to court.
Until now, no Klan group had ever been found liable for the actions of its individual members. And the federal court judgment came from an all-white jury.
We think this verdict sends a very strong message across the country that white Southerners, white Mobilians, will not tolerate this kind of activity.
It's not known if the United Klans has $7 million, but the aim was to dismantle whatever financial base the group has and to establish a precedent that can be used by other victims of Klan violence.
That was reporting from NBC Nightly News at the time in 1987, 6 years after her son was murdered. The goal essentially was to dismantle whatever financial backing these groups had. And it worked. The large headquarters of the Klansmen was given to the family of Michael Donald. It was a landmark victory in defeating white supremacy and their vitriolic agenda. Don't just aspire to get a conviction. Don't just aspire to put them behind bars or some of them behind bars. Go after their entire enterprise and shake them for everything that they have, for every racist thing that supports and funds their group. Go after it completely. And remember, this never would have happened if it were not for such vociferous pushback from Beulah May Donald and her village of defenders, eventually forcing the FBI's hand here to reopen the investigation and to dig deeper this time. But it was not just the FBI, though. It was a prominent section of the United States Department of Justice called the Civil Rights Division. They too were involved in this investigation and pursuing legal action, working alongside the FBI in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Alabama, pursuing this case under federal criminal civil rights statutes. It was the DOJ Civil Rights Division that helped make this possible. They were founded back in 1957 after demands to start investigations into racial discrimination and hate crimes that were happening in the South. And over the years, their work has expanded to voting rights, police misconduct, disability discrimination, but their mission has always remained clear: to defend and uphold the civil rights of all Americans, regardless of race, religion, or gender. But now, under the Trump administration, that civil rights division has been dismantled as part of their anti-DEI agenda. This was an op-ed published in a newspaper back in 1977. You can see there it says, "Roots was a racist attack on white people." For those of you who do not know, Roots is a film reflecting the emotional and visceral displays of the diabolical truth that slavery was in the United States of America. And Jeffrey Hart just hated that movie. But many did agree with him. And so he went on to mentor a lot of people in college, including this woman here, Harmeet Dillon. She said taking Professor Hart's class was life-changing. Really? The guy who said that Roots was racist to white people? Well, that student, Harmeet Dillon, is now the head of the United States Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. She is now leading the Civil Rights Division that is being dismantled by the Trump administration, the same Civil Rights Division that helped put Michael Donald's killers behind bars. The same Civil Rights Division that was founded in 1957 to investigate lynchings and racial discrimination in the South back in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, and has done so multiple times since. She is leading that same Civil Rights Division, and it is being dismantled, not in a way that essentially is going to help booster, civil rights investigations in this country, but in a way that is going to be served to enforce Donald Trump's executive orders, no matter how illegal or unconstitutional they are. Things have only gotten worse here. 70%, just this week, 70% of the lawyers in the Civil Rights Division are now leaving because of her leadership. And it has been so cataclysmic. It has been so racist. According to NPR, 250 attorneys have left or are planning to leave by the end of this month. Quote, this is from NPR here, "It marks a dramatic turn for the Story Division, which was created during the Civil Rights Movement in the push to end racial segregation. For almost 70 years, it had sought to combat discrimination and to protect the constitutional rights of all Americans in everything from voting and housing to employment, education, and policing. Now the administration is redirecting the division to enforce Trump's executive orders, including ending the alleged racial indoctrination in schools, defending women from gender ideology extremism, and combating anti-Semitism and purported anti-Christian bias. 5 current or former department officials, most of whom spoke on a condition of anonymity for fear of retribution, say the current efforts amount to the dismantling of the division and its traditional mission. The Civil Rights Division exists to enforce civil rights laws that protect all Americans," said Stacey Young, a former division attorney who left the department in late January. "It's not an arm of the White House. It doesn't exist to enact the president's own agenda. That's a perversion of separation of powers and the role of an independent Justice Department. By and large, attorneys in the division feel like they can no longer do the work they've always been able to do, including during the first Trump administration. Then, there was no mass exodus, department's veterans say. Attorneys stayed put and continued their normal work. The administration scaled back but did not end work in a few priority areas, like policing. But now, current and former officials say there's a sense that the division is weaponizing the country's civil rights laws against populations it's supposed to be protecting. They say the abandonment of the traditional mission has been devastating. One official recalled attorneys walking around the hallways in tears or sobbing through meetings. Quote, "The division has a few hundred lawyers who were diligent in making sure that people were held accountable for discrimination. Without that enforcement, without the knowledge that unlawful enforced discrimination can be tamped down through the division's work, we're going to see, I think, a whole lot more unlawful discrimination. It was on Wednesday this week that the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division announced that they would no longer be doing police reform settlements or investigations. They said, we're going to abandon that over the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And we're also going to end investigations into police departments for misconduct and abuse. This was just, of course, days away from the 5-year anniversary of George Floyd's death, who was murdered in broad daylight by a racist police officer who MAGA is now seriously considering pardoning, at least for the federal charges. The Civil Rights Division at the Justice Department being dismantled is extremely, extremely concerning. What we are watching right now is a coordinated attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion in this country at all levels of the federal government. Programs are being terminated in the federal government if they have a term of diversity or equity or inclusion. For instance, biodiversity programs have been terminated just because the word diversity is in it. It's this maniacal, illogical, diametrically stupid eradication of the United States federal government. And it is knowing that this is taking place. Donald Trump, in his first month in office, sought to repeal, per executive order, the Equal Employment Act of 1965, where employers basically cannot, under the law, discriminate against hiring people. Well, now that has been repealed because the administration is not for DEI anymore. They're not for civil rights anymore. Let's be 100% clear about this. There is a white supremacist in the White House enacting a white supremacist agenda supported by white supremacists all over the country. That's what is happening here. You do not dismantle the United States Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division and expect that no one is going to notice. We will notice. Intrepid journalism like this is essential. It is essential that people report on what's happening here because the DOJ Civil Rights Division being dismantled is going to be utterly catastrophic for communities who have suffered, for communities who have been hurt, for communities who have been taunted by law enforcement, by people who wish them harm. That will no longer be investigated by the highest department in this country for justice and for civil rights. They are the division that is in charge of looking out for marginalized communities and ensuring that everyone's civil rights is upheld and protected in this country. And that division has been dismantled. 70% of the lawyers are gone. This isn't about just getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workforce in the federal government. It's about ensuring that there's no one left to defend it, to defend the people's civil rights in this country. And that is something that we all should be terrified and horrified about, especially for our marginalized communities. My friend Brad Starks joins me next. Stay with us. The Jeremiah Patterson Show is an independent news media platform. If you want to see more special reports like this, please consider becoming a paid subscriber to my Substack at tjpsnews. When you become a paid subscriber, you'll get immediate access to exclusive content, opinion pieces, the upcoming Resistance podcast, and The More You Know, a series focused on diving deeper behind the headlines with historical context. One viewer who upgraded said, quote, "Your show is insightful, thought-provoking, and engaging. You shed light on key issues, inspire conversations, and tell impactful stories. Your passion and dedication shine through in every piece, keeping me informed and inspired," said Dr. Lisa. I do this because it matters, because the investigative journalism is imperative. And most of all, I'm unabashed and unafraid to tell the truth. Upgrade now from free to paid for just $7.99 a month or $75 a year. Joining me now for the interview is producer Brad Starks. Mr. Starks, thank you so well,
Hello.
Brad, we're on first name basis. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's great to be here. It's always great to be here on your show with you, Jeremiah. Thanks for having me.
What do you make of the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division that, among other things, investigates police departments being gutted under the Trump administration?
Well, I mean, as a fellow, person of color, it's very dismaying to actually sort of like see this happen. I think the African American community as a whole were probably hyper aware of what drastic changes were going to be happening should Trump take the White House, and that we were highly informed by what the reading of Project 2025 sort of held in it. So at this point, it's not a surprise, I think, to the Black community in that we have strived and asked for, anti-cruelty laws and new ways of police operation in our communities, for well over 25 to like 50 years. So yeah, I mean, it's just, it's very dismaying. And I think that, any African American or people of color who are aware and are connected, to the community there's just sort of like this exhaustion, where you'll see endless posts of folks just saying, this is exactly what we, said was going to happen, and here we are.
Exactly. And it's a part of this massive anti-DEI agenda that the administration is, perpetuating. And, it started really at the beginning of the year. We saw these large corporations like Target and Walmart instantly roll back their DEI initiatives. I know that we're not necessarily surprised by all that's happening, but has there been anything that has surprised you with the companies that have rolled back their DEI?
Quite honestly, I mean, I'll tell you, and I don't. Target used to be one of like my favorite stores to kind of like go to, but I was surprised to sort of see them bend the knee along with a lot of others. I mean, like when it comes to kind of sort of like Amazon and some of these other sort of companies that have happened, it doesn't it doesn't surprise me so much. I mean, Bezos. It's interesting to see Apple sort of walking a tightrope. I don't know. We probably have to do some research to sort of figure out exactly where they sit now, because, once I think Trump was made aware that, if all of the manufacturing of iPhones were done here in the States, iPhones would cost probably like close to $5,000. So, there was some wiggle room that he's given there, and as well with some of like the car companies. So I don't know. It seems to change, every other sort of like week on what's going to be levied with high tariffs, etc.
In regard to this anti-DEI campaign, we've seen not just corporations, but also individuals in certain communities respond to this by standing up and, protesting or, honoring the Black community in ways. We've seen heightened traffic of people going to support the National African American Museum in DC. We are seeing Donald Trump, of course, tried to erase Black history in a way that's massive. And we're seeing this metastasize in the States as well. What do you think about this movement, but also the fact that, the Black community remains committed in its resolve to always rise above the fray, no matter what time frame we're in?
Sure. Yeah. I agree with you there. I mean, I think that, again, it's nothing new to try to only teach a certain perspective of American history, which skews towards making out, a white supremacy and sort of tamping that down and not really addressing sort of like all of that kind of thing. And public school. I mean, think of sort of like the public school system as it is based on one line of one vision of what American history was. I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, I didn't find out about some of the most gruesome, Black massacres that happened until I was almost out of college.
Exactly.
And in which, unless you took specific classes that had to do with unknown sort of like Black history, you're not going to hear about that unless, Ken Burns does like, an expansive, sort of documentary. And I'm not here to kind of like slam Ken Burns. Ken Burns has literally brought so many interesting unknown facts to light with intensive documentaries. But, again, trying to make sure that the history of people of color in our nation and our place sort of like in history is been sort of like tapped down or watered down or just not even spoke of. This is par for the course for that.
The full interview with Brad Starks is available for paid subscribers on my Substack. We spoke more about DEI as well as Trump's tariffs and the things that has been happening under this administration, as well as the field for democratic resistance. So we spoke about that and more. That's available for paid subscribers on Substack. If you have enjoyed this video, which I definitely felt was important to put together here, please be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you all. If you're a fan of the Jeremiah Patterson Show, please recommend it to your family and friends. You can also support us by donating financially, as this is independent journalism and we rely on your donations to continue this crucial work. Another way you can support my work is by becoming a paid subscriber to my Substack at tjpsnews for just $7.99 a month or $75 a year. I will see you all officially next Monday, next week. I'm back. No longer working weekends anymore, so I'm excited to take this break. Another video is going to be coming out soon. It's probably going to be early Saturday morning, like at 12 o'clock or something, about the attack on abortion rights in this country. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to edit this and then put this out first. So thank you all so very much for watching. Thank you all so much for subscribing to the Jeremiah Patterson Show, for being with me this week. From the bottom of my heart, I'm eternally grateful for all of you. Be sure to follow us on Blue Sky and Substack at TJPS News. If you have any questions, a news topic request, or want to do a collaboration, don't be shy. Email me at tjpsnews@gmail.com. All right, everyone, have a great weekend.